At this point, we have been informed we have Omoyele Sowore, who is an activist as well as a journalist, and he joins us live on video chat. A very good morning to you, Mr. Sowore, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. We also have been told that Barrister Sam Kagbo-San will also join us later on, but he is on video chat, so we'd just like to acknowledge him as he is on standby. Now, in the meantime, let's kickstart things with Mr. Sowore. Day 3 of the hashtag End Bad Governance. We have seen violence across this, at some parts of the country, particularly in the north, where we saw looting in Kano and Kaduna. We've also seen an imposed curfew, 24 hours curfew from the day one in Kaduna, Kano, and also some curfew as well in Yobe as well. We also saw some part of looting at Inyanya, a border town between Abuja and Nasarawa. That as well, also a curfew was imposed in that town, part of the town in Abuja. But we also saw tear gassing, rounds of live ammunition shot at protesters from day 1 and day 2. And in day 1 as well, some protesters were arrested and accosted by thugs and arrested by the police. But Mr. Sowore, in the last 3 days, what is your take on the hashtag End Bad Governance protest? What do you think about the turnout, and the turn of events so far for the last 2 days?
Well, it was a phenomenal success, and I want to thank Nigerians who heeded our calls to come out across the country. As you have covered yourself, these protests kicked off in Abuja on Thursday, and very quickly spread from Port Harcourt to Maiduguri, from Badagry to Naibawa Park in Kano, and by the evening of Thursday, it had almost happened across the country. And this was what I told you the last time I was on the show, that this is going to be very massive, and it has continued. Yes, there's been some initial problems, which was caused by the government and security agencies, because they had thought that they could use their usual tactics of repression to stop Nigerians from demanding for their fundamental rights, which basically is about their own existence. And I'm sure they were shocked to know that within such a short period, Nigerians were conscientized, mobilized, and were able to insist, regardless of what the government did. You have covered extensively all kinds of strategies and tactics they used, bribing people, threatening people, bringing in traditional rulers, religious leaders, bringing in traditional practices to threaten people, especially in Lagos and Abuja, and then eventually cracking down and killing Nigerians who are just simply demanding for their rights. With regards to the looting that happened in Kano, it has now been established that it was carried out by people who were brought in by the APC to attack the government house. It had nothing to do with us. And that was why the protests continued the next day. Without the moment the government was exposed as being behind the violence and the looting, the protests went smoothly the next day, which was yesterday, and it's going to continue today. Even though somebody had expressed that maybe the crowds weren't as big as it started, of course, people needed to take a little bit of a break, but it would continue, and I assure you that these protests will continue to be massive for the next, as long as the protesters decide to be on the streets, which is for now is going to be for the first 10 days, and we'll see what goes on from there.
So I want to bring your attention to a comment made by a lawyer, that's Ebolu Adegberuwa. I'm not sure, I don't know if you've heard about this, but he, counting some of the losses that Nigeria has experienced in the past few days, called for an end to the protest and dialogue. I'm going to read exactly what he said and verbatim to you. Now, he said, I appeal to the protesters to withdraw themselves from their various protest grounds and to suspend the protests immediately and indefinitely, to give room for meaningful dialogue and engagement with federal government. He continues here, given that the protests were said to have been hijacked by sponsored agents, it is necessary to avoid further losses and casualties, the organizers and their representatives should embrace dialogue. I'm wondering what your take is on this particular statement, noting that initially he is one of the people who also called for the police to actually support the protesters from, I think, earlier last month. What's your take?
I've spoken to him. It's his private opinion, and he's entitled to it. He wasn't speaking for the organizers. He said that's how he felt, and I'm sure he has more information now that will be helpful to him going forward. But there's nothing wrong if he calls for anything he feels can bring about peace. You know, a lot of people would say different things at this time, and Ebu is extraordinarily a brilliant guy. He was a student union leader. He was president of University of Obafemi Awolowo University student union when I was student union president at the University of Lagos. So we've known each other for a long time. So there's nothing to worry about. The protest will continue. He understands that very well.
And what's your take on the losses that we have experienced, like in the north? We had the situation where there was the looting of the NCC yet to be commissioned building. There was also the shooting of a young man in, I think, Kano. And there's also curfew in Kaduna State and parts of Nasarawa as well.
Well, the protesters have broken the curfew on their own as of yesterday. There are no more curfews that I know of. The casualties you have mentioned, as you know yourself, was caused by the police. The police went out to kill people. The looting in Kano was carried out by the APC people. So there's nothing related to the protesters regarding this. The protesters have demonstrated what this is all about by stepping up the next day, which was yesterday, and protested across the country, and there are no casualties because the government and the police have been exposed. You know, if you were on Twitter, day before the protest, Lagos police claimed that there was a bomb in Lagos just to scare people, and that they detonated. But we knew these tactics. They were going to do anything possible, you know, to blackball the protester and the organizers. What they were trying to do on the first day by killing people and looting was to show to the country that, oh, this is what we said. These people are it's going to be hijacked. But this is day 30 now. Who has hijacked the protest except what the government did? Nobody. The protest is firmly back in the hands of Nigerian people. And they have demonstrated that this is going to be non-violent. The only violence you notice, and this is very important for framing by the media, was carried out by the government. So we should be calling on the government to fish out the policemen and the thugs who carried out, because they know them, they work together. These are their affiliates, they're their friends and cronies, they're the marshals of violence in the country, and they know them. And we are going to ensure that everybody who participated in killing peaceful protesters is brought to book.
And now, it's very interesting that you're saying that the government should be held responsible, because I want to extend a right of reply to you. Yesterday, during the Breakfast Central show here on News Central TV, we had Shaga Links, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Shaga Links, who is, of course, quite popular on social media, especially on X, that is Twitter. And he said that you ought to be held responsible for those that have died during the hashtag End Bad Governance protest, and said that you clamored for this protest, and so they followed your directive and now have died, and you ought to be held responsible. So let me extend a right of reply to you regarding his statements from yesterday and this accusations from him.
I don't take him that serious to be replying to that. This is very illogical to hold somebody who is fighting for justice responsible for crimes committed by the government. The people who carried out the looting, the killings yesterday are government officials. That's the police, or probably the DSS might be involved. We haven't seen the army act in any way to suggest that they were involved. So how do you then hold somebody responsible for exercising his own fundamental rights? I think there's something wrong somewhere with his thinking faculty.
I must also ask you as well about the entire process in terms of the government response and the heavy presence of security agencies, but most particularly the tactic and mode of engagement with protesters. Now, we understand that there are designated points allocated for this protest across states, for Lagos, Abuja, and other major states as well. But when protesters don't go to that place, they are tear gassed and sporadically shot at in the air, which has also resulted to one stray bullet hitting somebody, and now that person unfortunately is dead. I want to ask about that tactic. What, if just to your reaction on that? Should they not be properly geared for protesters, which is of course the riot shield and rubber bullets and water cannons instead of tear gas and live ammunition?
In the first place, I want to tell you that we were the ones who asked for designated places of convergence. And in Abuja, we requested for the Eagle Square. And the minister said they can't give it to us because he didn't see our letter. We sent the letter to him, he ignored it. He told them not to collect it or acknowledge it. And so in Lagos, they said they came with a law court order that we should stay at Ojota and somewhere else. And we responded that since there are convergence zones, people should, the government of Lagos, since they're the one who went to court, should provide buses, clean and safe buses to conduct, to carry protesters to and from the places designated. They never responded to that. With regards to our police and our security agencies, you all know them. They are not interested in any professional conduct. That's why somebody or several persons must be held accountable for the crimes of killing and murder of innocent civilians in this case. The standard procedure for engaging protesters is to wear non-lethal or to put up a non-lethal resistance by the security agencies. But our police are so trigger happy. They're always happy to kill their fellow citizens. I don't know how long this is going to continue, but this is part of why there's end governance. And this can quickly snowball into, I think the police is provoking Nigerians to have another NSAS added to this end bad governance. Otherwise, there was no basis to be killing people who are conducting themselves peacefully. By nature, protests are not supposed to be confined to anywhere, especially when the protesters are defined from the beginning. There was ample notice given to the government that they will be marching, there will be rallies, and all sorts of protest activities going on. So there was no basis for what the police did, but they knew what they were doing. The IG of police was trying to please the President Tinubu because 4 years was apparently added to his tenure, which will make sure doesn't happen, by the way. And the government, you keep referring to the government hasn't even said a word, apart from poking their hands in the eyes of Nigerians and mocking them. The government hasn't said a word. So there's no government response as far as I'm concerned, other than to just be mocking people after they have murdered them during the protest. And another thing I wanted to add is that if the protesters were not convinced and committed, why do you think they will keep coming out every day, even after they knew that they could get killed? Because people are tired, people are hungry, they've been stripped of their dignity. And for a lot of Nigerians, death is better than the kind of miserable existence that they have now. It's very sad that we have this kind of people in power who have no regard for our people and their existence. And, they behave as if, government is set up to become the greatest enemy of the people of the country.
Okay, a bit of balance here. Most of the comments and responses that we've had from the protesters out there, they've given credit to the security authorities for actually being out there with the protesters and supporting them, save for some few places, especially in Yobe, where we had that instance of the stray bullet, or rather Kano, rather. But let's talk about uniformity of the protests from across the country. Here in Lagos, we're recording good numbers, we're recording good tales, we're talking about support from the security agencies, but in other parts of the country, it might not be so. Later on in the show today, we'll be talking about the instances of violence from the protests. Now, regarding uniformity, we have clearly identified youth leaders who are taking charge in places like Lagos, Port Harcourt, and of course in Abuja. But it's not so in the rest of the country. What's your take on how this is panning out with different variations of the protests happening, some of them being overtaken by miscreants? In the north, we saw the looting of the NCC yet to be commissioned building. Please, your take on that.
Well, this is part of the reason why, even as journalists, you should continue to investigate every word you put out there. You keep referring to the looting of NCC, but you are leaving out the people who have been identified as looting the NCC. The Kano State government had also accused some individuals of carrying out what happened at the NCC. I saw in the news yesterday an APC youth leader who was part of the looting, who had met earlier with the deputy governor of one of the candidates in the APC. So, and the other thing that may not be far-fetched, which is another thing you should look at, is that how are you sure that it's not the NCC people themselves that arrange the looting? Because this is a place that was commissioned several years ago. It wasn't now commissioned. They just refused to put it to use, and now they want to put it to use, and then suddenly it's looted. Why would you have such multi-billion naira center just left unprotected, and it's now, according to them, looted? But the focus on looting doesn't address the fundamental reason that this protest was being sabotaged by the government. Yeah, in the protest that has happened, we have counted over 26 states or so that have participated in this protest. They're focusing on Kano, as if those chairs that were looted by the APC people are more important than the lives that were taken. The NCC can build a new center. They can refurbish it, but you can't rebuild life. That you can't bring back a person that has been killed. So it's important that in this narrative that we keep hearing of, as if this protest was designed to loot, it wasn't designed to loot, and it did not do that. That is the reason why the second day of the protest, the protesters were able to prove to the world, not to Nigerians now, to the world, that this protest was not about what the government tried to paint it as by going back. And this day 3, you are covering day 3. Have you heard of any looting? And there's no looting associated with the protesters. Looting has been associated to the failure of the security agencies, either in places where they have connived directly with the looters themselves, that's if they are not looting these places themselves, or in places where they refuse to carry out their fiduciary duties to protect. We gave them ample opportunity. We met with the police IG. We met with him on Zoom, and we discussed what this is what it's about. We asked them to stay at alert, to protect. They said no, they're not interested. The IG said it during that Zoom meeting, that he's not interested in protecting us if we refuse to be confined to where they put us. He said it. If that happened in any country in the world, the IG should have resigned or be fired by now. We are not a serious country. And that's the reason why people are asking for end bad governance. Because when you have people who are put in places of responsibility, we should act whenever there's need for them to do their jobs. And they refuse, and they tell you arrogantly that they're not interested. You keep them there. How are you going to have a country that works for you, or me, or anybody for that matter?
Mr. Sowore, we're pressed for time, but hopefully you can be able to answer my question before this time is over. And it's a twofold question. Yesterday, the chief of staff of the Nigerian Army addressed the nation, or rather, he addressed pressmen, and he said that the media was giving too much press or too much coverage to the protest. I would like for you to respond to that statement. And then secondly, if the president was to heed to the demand or the call to address the nation and protesters, what would his message look like? What would you anticipate his message to look like to put an end to the protests?
For the chief of defense staff, they live in the past. I don't know. This is part of Nigeria's problem. If everybody who is in the mainstream media refuses not to report this, he will get the best reporting that he deserves. There's a different arm of the media now, known as social media, that does justice to everything, including what you don't want to know. So he's just setting you guys up to fail because he lives in the past. They still think that the entire Nigerian landscape, media landscape, is NTA and Radio Nigeria, and then Daily Times of those days. That's the mentality of the chief of staff. Otherwise, how can you say that the biggest event happening in the country should not be covered? Who does that? Who does that? I mean, I can't even imagine that he said that. And you're talking about the president, what he was saying. That's not my job. That's the job of the president, if he's the president. It's not my job to advise him what to do. I'm not one of the people who elected him to power. And I've said it repeatedly that I don't believe he was elected by Nigerians. And this is what happens with terrible elections. It produces some of the most insensitive and incompetent people who feel that they're not responsible to anybody. So you can't blame him.
Well, I mean, the numbers, when you look at the numbers, it's up for debate. But Mr. Omoyele Sowore, we appreciate you for doing this with us and coming on. We want to say thank you so much and a very good morning to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a nice day.